Good morning and welcome to the first installment of The Underbrush, where we are uncovering the secrets of marketing. Joined here this morning by my friend Chris Reese. He's the COO, the CFO of Atlanta Soundworks, and also a serial entrepreneur. Chris, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Dakota. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for making it all the way out during the rain. The crummy weather. I know traffic is always never good.
It's always exciting in Atlanta. You know, it's just part of being here. But there's a lot of great things happening in this city, so we're excited to be a part of that as well.
Love that. Well, cool, Chris. We'll get into it a little bit. Let's first start. I'd like to ask you to give us a background of who you are, kind of how you got into what you do, and maybe a little bit about Atlanta Soundworks.
It's a great story. Much longer story than we have time for, but I will do my best to compress it. I started my early career. I've always been involved and fascinated with technology around audiovisual, and as well as security. And so early on in my career, when I was trying to figure out who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be when I grow up, I had a brief run in access control, security, high-end AV, and then deviated from that, took a little segue into an accounting information systems practice, had that for a little while, and then got into buying and selling phone companies, ended up starting my own wholesale company, which we built up to a little over $4 million in recurring revenue in just under 4 years. Had that sold. We were at the final closing table when the meltdown at the end of 2008 happened. That whole thing crumbled. We lost the whole business because we'd paid off our debt with our cash reserves. So you learn a lot of lessons through those things.
Sure.
But through that whole process, I got a reputation. Didn't know that I was getting that reputation as a turnaround person. And so I got recruited by a board of directors to come out to the Atlanta area and take a look at a technology company in Swanee, Georgia. One thing led to another. I ended up accepting a role there and did some great things. For about a year and a half, we got the company turned around. It had been around for several years and had produced some really cool intellectual property, but lackluster financial results. And within a year and a half, we'd done some really cool high-profile projects, one of them with the city of New York and Visa around the whole 2010 Olympics down in the New York subway. And so that's what got me out here to Atlanta and actually introduced me initially into Galen Boyce and Shane Boyce at Atlanta Soundworks.
Okay, gotcha.
So then after the N4D, which was the name of the technology company, for about 10 years, I had a consulting firm that we built up to, I think at the peak, we had about 8 partners involved in that firm. And I traveled all around the world working with different companies, doing turnarounds, organizational transformation, big focus on organizational health. I'm a Patrick Lencioni fan. Then ended up talking in some conversations with between some of the work that I was doing with your dad on the low voltage consulting and design work with some of the projects he was involved in, and Galen expressed an interest in retiring, and so one thing led to another, and so now Shane and I have Atlanta Soundworks. So that's
fantastic.
That's the truncated version.
Sure, yeah, the quick and easy.
Yes.
Well, cool.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's actually how we met was through my dad.
That's right.
Right, we were over there in that building over there in Alpharetta.
That's
and
right.
That's how we got to know each other, and I just knew you as the sound guy. I was like, oh, he's the guy that's putting in the speakers.
Yes.
And he's putting in all the lights. He's a tech guy.
Which goes back to personal brand.
Sure.
Right. And so that was one thing that for too long in my life I fought against, because I didn't want to just be the sound guy.
Yeah.
I wanted to be more. And it took me a while to really learn to just hey, just lean into that.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you understand and people find value in. So lean into that and see where it takes you.
Yeah. I had a friend growing up, and he was really good at everything that he tried to do. I mean, for no reason at all, he was just good at it. I mean, he'd go in, and his first game of basketball was in 7th grade, and he scored like 25 points.
You got to love those people, don't you?
No. It's very frustrating because I'm like, I've been playing basketball since I was in 1st grade.
Yeah.
But his mom used to tell him, she was like, you need to pick one sport. He was like, why? He's like, because you can either be great at one thing or you can be good at a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that kind of speaks to that thing, is like, let everybody know you're great at sound.
Yeah, and what's cool about Atlanta Soundworks, which we're in the process of rebranding as ASW, because we do a whole lot more than sound. We do, I like to say, we do everything from conference rooms to concert halls.
Oh, nice.
So we're doing, of course, all the theatrical AV for the new Lawrenceville Performing Arts Center, but at the same time, we're working with a lot of very large corporate clients, helping them make sure they've got the right technology in their spaces to empower their workforces to do what they need to do. And something else that's very important to us is a concept that came out of the organizational alignment work that I did, which is this concept of brand alignment. Mm-hmm. Right? There's no such thing as a neutral interaction with a brand. You're either reinforcing the brand image that you're trying to put out there, the ideal that you want, or you're calling it into question, mm-hmm. right, with that interaction. And so that boils down to the technology that's in the workspace, the design of that workspace, because every engagement with a brand is an experience that, like I say, needs to be aligned with what that brand image should be.
Absolutely. You know, I don't know if you know this, but our tagline here is to save the world from boring, broken marketing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I love that.
And so the idea is to get away from this middle road where you make everybody happy. Love me or hate me, right?
Right.
Figure out which one that you want to be, but you're talking about the brand and figuring out, you know, which way do you want to go. And that's what we're trying to do here, is get rid of boring, broken marketing and either love me or hate me.
That's right. And you really do. You've got to lean into who you are. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's okay if you're controversial.
Sure.
Right. So broadcasting lost one of the greats yesterday, mm-hmm. and love Rush Limbaugh or hate Rush Limbaugh, you could not ignore Rush Limbaugh.
That's right.
Right. And he created a whole industry, mm-hmm. and revitalized AM radio and talk radio, took it to a level that it had never been before. And a lot of people have tried to imitate that, and there's been a lot of careers born out of riding his coattails.
Sure.
So that's exactly right. You just got to go out there and be who you are.
Yeah, be unashamed.
That's right.
We tried to ride on the coattails of Rush Limbaugh. We were close to doing it when I was with Liberty Cigars.
Okay.
We wanted to get him having a
That's
cigar.
Right.
Unfortunately, right at about the time that we were going to get something pushed out to him was when he got diagnosed.
Okay. Yeah.
So this probably isn't a good idea.
That's probably not good timing. Yeah.
Yeah. But very, very influential man. Very awesome to get to see and be a part of all of that. And it was very sad news to hear that yesterday.
Yes,
sure.
it was.
Yeah. So during some of the information that you kind of sent over, mm-hmm. you talked about, and I don't know what this is, so I'd love for you to kind of explain what this means, is experiential design. You know, what is that? What does that mean? What does that entail? I know that's part of what you do.
Mm-hmm. So going back to brand alignment,
mm-hmm.
Experiential design is this concept of wanting to, so when we think about a brand, right, you want to try to bring up emotions that are associated with that brand. That's how a brand goes from just being something else in the marketplace to transcendent, mm-hmm. right? You think about the brands that have almost got a cult-like following. I mean, and when you think of these brands, these are the brands that people will pay a premium to buy a piece of clothing that has that logo on it. And if you go all the way to the extreme, I mean, people will tattoo these brands' logos on their body.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about transcendent brand. And with experiential design, what we're really trying to create, even with something as simple as a boardroom, right, or a conference room or a huddle space, is an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always thinking through, what is the experience of the end user of that technology? If it's a conference room or a boardroom, you want that experience to be seamless. You want to have great technology, but the technology should really be transparent in that space so that the CEO is not worried about being embarrassed in front of his board because the technology is not working right, or he can't share his desktop or a presentation or whatever. So we're really thinking through the experience. So that's at a very simple level, all the way to larger brand engagements that we're working with, different municipalities or bigger brands to create an immersive brand experience. And when we talk about that, this could be something interactive projection mapping, or combining AR and VR technology with physical space. So experiential design is really that concept of, we're not just thinking through, okay, what's the utilitarian value of the technology in the space. We're moving beyond that to creating a user experience that's going to create positive emotions associated with that brand.
Right. Yeah, and so you talk about it as it really adds to the experience. It's not the technology is the experience, right? The experience is what they're trying to get out of it, and the technology adds to it. Is
that's exactly right. When we sit down with a client at the design phase, we want to know what their end game is. And so for us, it's just not, hey, we need a conference room and this kind of thing, or we're trying to build a concert hall or venue. We work with a lot of houses of worship. We ask a lot of questions. What's their worship style? What's your end game? What is your goal during the corporate worship time? We take a lot of the production concepts and apply them to the way we design the spaces for our corporate clients.
Okay.
This is the reason that we've now taken on several furniture brands. We've got a showroom in Midtown, and so because we got frustrated with the lack of coordination. So much furniture now has technology integrated into it.
Yeah.
Right? And so you go into the space and you don't have the right floor, you don't have floor pockets in the right space. Or if you do have a floor pocket, you don't have the right technology in that floor pocket so that it's seamless and you're not having to, put surface track somewhere, and it's just poor design, right? So we're thinking through that entire experience with the mindset of what's the end game you want to accomplish.
Right.
Right. And so for a CEO, it could be being able to do a TED-style town hall with both shareholders and employees. So what we start with the experience the client is trying to create, and then we approach the technology to figure out, okay, how do we create that experience?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's honestly the same goes for your marketing as well, right? You start with the brand. Who are you, right? Who are you, and what are you trying to tell, or what are you trying to teach, rather? And so then you start to pull in all these tactics, and tactics alone don't really do anything for you. So starting with the brand, you have your brand guidelines. You know what you can and can't say to make sure that your clients and your customers understand who you are. And so whether it's a blog or it's a social media post or you're pushing out some kind of design, it all needs to speak to the same thing to create that user experience that you're talking about.
That's exactly right. And I'll tell you a place that's very overlooked and this was something that came out of a lot of the organizational transformation work that I did, is you've got two brands, right? That you need to manage, or two audiences that you need to manage. You've got the brand as it faces your existing and potential clients, but then you've got an inward-facing brand, right? And if your brand to your own team members, right, your employees, does not align with what you're putting out there into the marketplace, you're going to create a disconnect.
Sure.
There's a very large school district that will go unnamed, but they had this disconnect. They were trying to put out to the marketplace that, hey, if you want your kids to be able to utilize the latest in learning technology, we're a cutting edge school district, you need to come to us. And then the employee experience was completely disconnected from that. And I'll tell you how it boils down to some very, very practical things. This was an inventory that they needed to do of, the central, the ISC sends out a thing to each of the schools and says, hey, we need you to do an inventory, make sure you've got everything we think you have there at the campus, right? So they send a PDF printout of everything that they've got a record of that school should have on their campus.
Okay.
And where this disconnect is created is, wait a second. We had employees that came from much smaller school districts that had barcode technology, right? You're not having to look up everything and go around with paper and check off everything and then do data entry. You just go around and say, okay, this is what's supposed to be in this room, and you scan everything. But they didn't have that technology in this school district that claimed to be cutting edge out there, right? And so you get this disconnect, and it happens within organizations as well. You can have an organization that is trying to be modern and relevant and all of that, but then your own employees struggle with the technology. They're using 8-year-old laptops or whatever it is, right? So you've got to make sure that brand experience is consistent, both as it faces exterior and as it faces inward with your own team. Or you're not going to be able to deliver on the brand promise you're trying to make out to your clients.
That's right. Yeah, and it's very important to make sure that if your team, because it may not always be you talking to your clients, maybe your team member is having a chance to talk to them, and if what they're saying is different than what you're saying, then they see that gap and they're like, hang on, wait a minute, what's going on within this company that's not jiving? That's
right. That's exactly right. So the message has to be consistent.
That's right.
And if there is a disconnect, it will come out.
Sure.
It will come out.
I just recently restarted House of Cards. Have you watched that
TV
show?
I have, yes.
So he knocks his ring on the table twice before he leaves, and the one guy goes, he's like, why do you do that? He goes, my father used to say it was for preparation. So I'm getting my knuckles ready in case I have to get in a fight, and it doubles as knocking on wood. So it's preparation and luck. And he goes, and he's like, well, wasn't your father a peach farmer? He goes, yeah, not a very successful one. He was better at giving advice than taking it. And so the same goes in any kind of company. You want to be just as good as taking the advice as you are at giving it.
That's exactly right. And, if you look at Lencioni's organizational model for organizational health, there's 4 parts to that. And the first part is you have to have a cohesive leadership team, right? So it's just kind of like in a household. If mom and dad aren't on the same page, kids figure it out real quick, and they learn how to play them against each other, right? So you've got to have a cohesive leadership team. Leadership team has to be behind the same vision and all on board, right? Now, within the confines of their meeting room, they can have their disagreements, but once you walk out that door, you're a unified front, right? We're all on the same team. And then you've got to create clarity in the organization, right? What do we do? Why do we exist? How do we behave? What's most important right now? And what are the individual players' roles and responsibilities in relation to that, right? And then you've got to figure out ways, and this is where companies like Liger Partners can help very much, is you've got to figure out ways to over communicate that message both outwardly and inwardly in the organization, right? And that's where a lot of folks break down. They'll communicate it, and after about 2 or 3 weeks, they get tired of it, or they get distracted, move on to other things, and forget to keep reinforcing that. And then the fourth part is to reinforce that clarity, right? Reinforce those messages, reinforce those things that the leadership team has said are important in that organization. We had a client that I was working with, and they were having problems implementing a new system within the organization. And so I asked them, I said, so tell me about this. What types of incentives are related, or what type of punishment is tied to the utilization of this new system? I said, what do you mean? I said, well, you're trying to get people to take this new path, and they've got muscle memory, right? And they're going to take the path of least resistance.
Right.
And there was absolutely no incentive tied to this particular system that they were trying to get implemented. The other thing that we'll see people do is, they don't want to be too hard, and so they'll say, well, we've got some people that really like this other system that we've been using, or this other process, so we'll leave this A/B option for a while. And if you've ever read the book Switch, which is a great book on change management.
No, I haven't.
You got to take away that other path, right? You prepare the organization, you tell them what's coming, what changes are coming. You communicate that, you make sure you've got people trained for the new system, and then on cutover day, it's cutover day. And that other road is closed.
Right.
So you have no other option. And then what you find is within about 3 or 4 weeks, the new way becomes, well, that's the way we've always done it. So, that fourth step in Lencioni's model of he calls it reinforcing clarity, but it's reinforcing that change or those values or that brand image,
right,
is where a lot of organizations, break down and fall short. And anytime I'm working with an organization and they start talking about core values, that's another one. I'll ask them, okay, well, how do you reinforce those core values in your organization? Well, what do you mean? Well, are your performance reviews tied to those core values and modeling those values within the organization? So it is it's a whole ecosystem that you've got to put together. And if you don't execute on all 4 of those disciplines, you're not going to end up with a healthy organization, and it's going to make it out to the marketplace in the form of your brand.
That's right. That's fantastic. Who writes Switch?
You put me on the spot. I'm having a senior moment. It is. It's 2 brothers,
okay.
And but if you go to Amazon, and you type in Switch, there's another good one. How to Change When Change is Hard.
Okay.
Is another great book out there on change management.
Yeah. That's okay. I use Google as my memory as well.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Everything that I forget, I ask Google.
In fact, How to Change When Change is Hard may very well be the subtitle of Switch. So.
That's awesome. Well, I'll definitely check both of those out. But before we get into a little bit more of kind of your personal passions, I did want to ask you about your marketing efforts and what you guys are doing at ASW. Are there anything that you've got, maybe some secret sauce that you're willing to share that are getting you guys out there, or how are you managing your social media?
We are doing a dismal job of that right now.
Perfect.
We are. So the ownership change has just recently happened.
Okay.
And so there were things involved with that, but we are in the middle of relaunching our brand and really sitting down and thinking through the various customer journeys that that we need to document.
Sure.
So we know how to effectively communicate out to our audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have 3 primary audiences. We do a lot of work in house of worship, I mentioned.
Yep.
We've got corporate clients, and then we've got we're in the educational space as well. And they're all different journeys. While the needs are similar, there are nuances to each of those. And then you start looking down each of the technology paths, from something as simple as, alarm and access control and video surveillance, all the way into the more complex technologies that are involved in professional audio, video, and lighting.
Yeah.
Hey, Dakota, we have a couple of comments.
Sure.
On Facebook, April says, great book recommendations. Kirsten loved the idea of tackling change by eliminating the comfort zone path. And then Jose says, you have to make sure that your brand is consistent internally and externally. Agree with Chris.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the thing to take away from that is consistency, right? You touched on it for a minute there, but if your brand, if your marketing, if your message, if your experience is not consistent, then it never really has the chance to really take that grasp. And then you find yourself bouncing around from place to place. And then, like you said, your customers are like, wait a minute, who are you guys? Like, last week you were this, but then employee B said this, and you're telling me this. Like, who are you? Like, you got to make sure that you're consistent, right? That's the biggest thing to making any kind of marketing successful, is consistently speaking and teaching that message that you're trying to tell.
That's exactly right. And it's even more challenging with a company like ASW, where we've got this horizontal integration across different technologies, right? So you're a technology company, but you also sell furniture. How does that fit together? Or you're pro AV, but then you do structured cabling, like all the infrastructure and building automation. How does that fit together?
Right.
And so what we've got to do is we've got to be very consistent about and intentional about communicating. Look, it all goes back to the brand experience that you're trying to create. So whether it's a developer that wants a certain experience associated with the properties he or she is developing, right? That's a brand experience, right?
Yeah.
You've got the folks, and the name's escaping me now, but that developed Halcyon or the Avalon here in Atlanta, right? Or Atlantic Station is another one.
Sure.
Right? And there's a brand associated with those developments. So we go all the way from there to a specific venue or corporate space, and what is the experience associated when you walk into that space, right? Everything from digital signage to the furnishings that are in there, the lighting that's in there, all of those things. And then again, that brand image has to be consistent with the employee experience with that brand as well.
You've probably heard this from our friend JT. It's the small things that make you big.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
So, every little piece adds to that user experience. And if one thing is off, they may not know why it feels off, but they'll notice it. And so it's got to be consistent. It's all got to run together to the same story.
And I'm a big enough geek that I wanted to put this into a mathematical formula. So I actually did and submitted it for copyright.
Of course you did.
The concept of that formula is that, it's a very long slog to create that, to get that brand image that you want.
Okay.
Right? And it's just consistent and pushing, and it's a lot of effort. It doesn't take long at all. In fact, it's almost instantaneous when somebody has an experience that's inconsistent with that, right? And then it's even harder to come back from that.
Yeah. That's interesting, just the psychology of the way that our brains work is we're a lot more apt to remember bad things and bad experiences than we are good.
That's exactly right.
And I'm not smart enough to know why, and I haven't studied it, but I just find that very interesting because you're right. All it takes is a split second. Undo everything that you've been doing for the last 6 months, the last 6 years.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Well, speaking about personal development, I know that's a passion of yours, is helping people realize their full potential in life. Can you speak about that while we've got a few minutes left here?
Yeah, so that is a big passion, and it took me, I think we're all here for a purpose, and one of my purposes that I've realized is to do exactly that, is to be that cheerleader, to be a coach, to be a guide to people, and help them develop into their full potential. You know, the world's going to fill you with a lot of negativity and try to beat you down. In fact, unfortunately, you get a lot of that from peers as well, because they're emotionally unhealthy and insecure, right? And so to be able to sow into people and help them understand where their true value resides. As a Christian, I believe our true worth comes in, who we are from our Creator, and who He believes we are, and what He had in mind when He created each one of us. Yeah. Right. And if you go back to Genesis, one of the things that is kind of the fallout from that whole fall of man thing is that it is now a battle to become who we were intended to be when we were created, because we now have this enemy that's out there that's scared of who we were intended to be and scared of our potential, and is absolutely dead set on making sure that we don't fully realize that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw a meme or a post or something that was just very powerful to me because of what it said. And it was, for anybody that struggles with a self-image issue, or it's just a confidence issue or something like that, and you look yourself in the mirror and you don't like what you see. Think about our Creator and how much time He spent. And it said, I spent so much time creating you the way you are, and that's not enough for you?
Right. And then to look at just creation and the wonder of the universe, and then to think, as a Christian, I believe that Jesus was who He said He was. Yeah. Right. And so when you start to incorporate that into your worldview, and you realize that, while we were still set against God, while we were still in our rebellion, He and Jesus collaborated together to create a path for redemption. Sure. And you think about that, and to put it in earthly terms, I mean, if you had another human being that while you were dead set against them. So, I mean, think about the person that just makes your skin crawl. Yeah. Right. And if you had so much love for them that you were willing to put your own self on the line and sacrifice for them to redeem them, what kind of impact that would have on you. Yeah. And that's what happened. And that's what happened.
Yeah. So it speaks volumes.
It does.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. So I'm curious, how are you doing that in the workplace? Do you have a side thing that you do, or is this just what you do from a day-to-day basis? You have conversations like this where you're like, "Hey, you are really good at this. You may know it, you may not know it, but let's tap into that."
It's a little bit of all of those. So I try to be very intentional about creating opportunities in the workplace for group discussions. We may have a book club that we start in the mornings before the office day gets started. They're always optional. Yeah. Whoever wants to plug into that. I also try to be very intentional when I'm doing performance reviews. This is, we call them at ASW, this is our coaching time, right? Because that's what it's really about. This is a coaching session. We're making an investment in this individual. We need to be sure that we are coaching them up so that they can provide maximum value to the organization, right? Yeah. That's our responsibility. And then I also am involved in a men's ministry called Men of Grace, where We do everything from a couple of retreats a year. It's been a little challenging this last year with COVID. But we also are engaged in something called radical mentoring, where we take two mentors that are at least 2 to 3 life stages ahead of the men that they are mentoring. And it's a 9-month intensive program where they live life with these guys, and they facilitate some heavy conversations that lead these guys to make some decisions that make them better, if they're husbands, better husbands, if they're, maybe future husbands, better at that, and fathers and leaders.
Sure.
So that's the whole goal.
Yeah.
So
That's fantastic.
Attack that on multiple fronts.
I love that. Well, hey, we're getting a little bit pressed for time, but I did want to give you the chance to express, how is the best way for any of our viewers, anybody that's watching or will watch, how do they get in contact with you, with ASW, with anything else that you're doing outside of it? What's the best way that they can contact you?
Absolutely. So you can always give us a call, 770-716-7400. You can shoot us an email, gurus, GURUS, at ASWAV.com, Alpha Sierra Whiskey, Alpha Victor.com. I've done that a few times.
Yeah.
And that's the best way. And you can email me personally, Chris R, CHRISR, at ASWAV.com as well.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thanks so much for coming out here and taking the time to sit down and have a chat with me. It's been such a pleasure to hang out and talk about you and your background and your passions and ASW, but I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Dakota. Appreciate the time and opportunity.
Absolutely. So I'm your host, Dakota Ward. This is the first installment of the Underbrush. So happy that Chris was able to be my first guest in this new installment.